Yes.
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
recording.
hold on.
Now we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that what happened was one time, Ken Rundle and who else was it? It was, I can't remember. He had a couple girls, and they were, he was doing a progressive rock show.
Yes.
And it's when we were doing progressive at night and top 40 during the day.
Right.
And anyways, Bob, the records were skipping, and Bob came in and found them naked in the old green waste barrels that were in the basement, that all the ticker tapes went into.
Yeah, yeah.
And partying, they had been smoking pot, and so those are some of the crazy days.
Oh yes, if the walls could talk. And
yes. Well, it's interesting. I always said that you watch WKRP and it was believable,
yes,
because
that was KRP was a much more cleaned up version of some of the stories we could tell about VIC.
Oh yeah.
Hey, Joe, I got a question for you.
Sure.
How did we get, who was the guy that did that song, WKRP in Cincinnati? We got him to do a customized one. You're at WVIC in East Lansing.
Yeah.
Scott Westerman, I'm sure you can replicate that with your various voices and overlays.
Hey guys. Hey guys.
How you doing?
It's good to see you. Cynthia, I've been worried about you. You okay? You gonna make it?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. You see the bruise?
What happened here?
She was coming down the stairs, and she started to lose her balance, forward to grab the railing, and she just went down. I was,
oh my gosh,
I was in the back room, and I heard it, and I jumped up and ran to the stairs, and I looked up at first and didn't see her, and then I looked down and saw her.
Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. Jeez,
it's frightening.
It was a late night.
I spent 2 days in the hospital over it.
Oh my God.
Really? Did you get a concussion or something?
Well, they weren't sure why it had happened.
Oh, okay. So they want to know what made you dizzy?
Exactly. And from my standpoint, what's wrong with just being clumsy?
Right.
Well, you're dizzy in love with Joe Buys. That's what
Yeah.
I understand.
Absolutely.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Well, look at this.
Dana, is this your magic there? You made this happen? So
I'm just pushing some buttons on Zoom, that's all.
I didn't even know you could do this. This is cool.
that's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Background.
Going in and out.
Well,
Yeah.
well, we
Well,
can
that's
only
part of
get
our
up-
problem. My
Yeah, we
my
can
brain isn't working too well, so
Well, you're falling into the bushes.
yeah.
Oh.
So, hey, Dr. Steve, once we get this rolling, you want to be the MC?
Well, I'll tell you what, I have to do one thing real quickly. I have to walk away for a second and start the oven because Lori is out doing some shopping. I told her I'd warm the oven up for dinner because I literally didn't get in. I talked to Scott like 2 minutes before I hit the link to get on here. So I am just catching up. I mean, Scott is perfect as an MC.
No, listen. I like being a participant.
I'm spreading the pleasure. I'll be right back.
Cool.
Well, what do you guys think about the new offer to our football coach?
Cocaine,
Yeah,
that's what it is. At least the students aren't paying for it.
it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
found that interesting. They had the two donors, they said, we'll pay for it. So,
Yeah.
but I tell you one thing, he's done wonders with the program. By the way, I have a story for you. So on Friday nights, I used to go with my mom and dad down to Diamonddale, a restaurant called Mike's Village Restaurant. Parents love going there, fish fry Friday nights. They knew their friends and they knew all the people that worked there. Anyway, one of my dad's employees would show up with his classmate. Classmates went to school at Sexton, I think it was, and they would sit and chat, and then they closed mics, and then my mom had a stroke, and then my dad died but we used to see them, and the friend that was my dad's with this guy, he died a couple months ago. So I've been talking, Mike Munn is his name. I've been talking to him, and I said, let's go out for dinner sometime. It's been a while. Sure. And we did this last Wednesday. And we were sitting there chatting, and I said, and he goes, I have a question for you. Are you known as Dana, or are you as Don's son? I said, well, hopefully I'm Dana, but I hear a lot of I'm Don's son. And he goes, oh, I was curious because I didn't want to be known as my father's son. I want to be known as Mike Munn. I said, well, who's your father?
Biggie.
Yeah.
Is
I
that
didn't
true?
know it. Honest to God, his dad was
Wow.
Big Munn.
I went to school with Mike.
Did
And,
you?
Oh,
Yeah, because I grew up in East Lansing.
Okay.
And so, yeah, he was in our school. So was Duffy Doherty's son. And he was younger than I was. Mike was older. And so, you know, we had a lot of people in that time, you know, and the interesting thing is that what I get so much amusement out of is all these Michigan people that, you know, talked about how we were, you know, the little brother and all this stuff. And, you know, when I was in college, we didn't even think of Michigan as our top competition. It was always Notre Dame.
right. Yeah.
You know, and you know, but most of these people, because they're young, you know, as you get older, you have these disparages. But
Yeah.
you know, is that we were kicking Michigan's butt all the time and won 2 national championships, you know, in the late 50s and into the 60s, you know, and then when Bo Schembechler came in and Don Canham, you know, that's when Michigan, you know, took off again. They had
Right.
had a lot of glory in the past, but
Mhm.
so with me, it's always, you know, I've known it's always been cyclical, and you know, I just wish Mel Tucker a lot of luck, and he's got a lot of pressure on him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not a job, not an easy job. And you know, usually the way that it goes is once they start getting the big money, then everything falls apart. So
Yeah,
I hope
You
that
know,
doesn't happen.
my impression of him, he is rather Nick Saban-esque. And I think that, you know, the way that he talks about it when he does his press conferences or any kind of interview, you know, you can tell he is in the zone. He is definitely plugged into what he wants that team to do or what players have to do which things. He is not a clipboard coach. You know, he is involved in the game. You know, we have season tickets and you watch him on the sidelines during a game, and he's not sitting idly by while he lets the assistants, you know, take care of everything. And you know, as you know, Joe, because you teach leadership, you know, he is exhibiting leadership with his management of that organization. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
have a positive regard for that. I also think that I don't know I don't know how you do this and where you get these, but it's very clever. So I like that fact. And, you know, he's kind of a kind of clinician, kind of like Saban, you know, there may not be, he has more personality than Saban, in my opinion, but for the most part, I see very much a lot of Saban-esque qualities about what, and he even said that Saban is of all the coaches he's worked with, Saban is truly his mentor.
Yeah.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry to hear that. I hate.
I know he is putting his own spin on it, but that's why when I first heard the rumors of the LSU courtship before this contract talk started coming up, I thought, okay, he's going to act like Saban and leave us.
Yeah. Well, it
Yeah,
sounds like
well, and
Mel's
he
got a few
worked
more
it out.
interpersonal skills than Nick does. I mean, that
Yes.
I know where you're coming from, Cynthia. Nick was not very much fun to be around, was he?
No.
Yeah, and but Tucker worked at LSU, and you know, so, and that was the thing that bothered me, was the fact, you know, that I thought, well, maybe he likes, you know, Louisiana. I don't know why anybody would
Right.
necessarily, but
New Orleans.
well, that's true.
Yeah.
But well, we'll see what happens. How's it been for you, Steve? Because you must get it both ways. I mean, in terms of,
Well, you know, Joe, everyone knows I'm a Spartan through and through. They can't pull any of this Michigan stuff on me without me giving them the squirrely eye. And what is fun for me is we have a sports commentator and analyst by the name of John Bacon. I don't know if you've ever heard him on our air. He's usually on Friday mornings around 8:35. And I'm the one that recruited John Bacon to Michigan radio back in 2007. And John has written all these books about Michigan football and Jim Harbaugh. And John was actually there on the boat in Leelanau when Harbaugh was courted to U of M. And so he writes a lot of this stuff in a first person perspective. But in the years that he's been working with us, because he comes into my office, usually before pandemic every week when he's finished his commentary, when he's recorded it, and we do a little bit of debrief, he approaches things on a very balanced basis about Michigan versus Michigan State. And as a matter of fact, some have accused him of being a Michigan State homie in maize and blue colors. So, I think that the way that activity is portrayed on our station is pretty, it isn't lopsided just because we're a university licensee, and we do maintain a pretty good firewall with the university. So as a result, we don't feel that we have to, like a local sports talk station, we just don't have to, cower over anything that U of M wants for athletics, because first of all, there's not that much athletic coverage that we have on our air outside of occasional, commentaries from John Bacon and maybe a feature on stateside every now and then. It's not like we don't have a dedicated show to talking about the Wolverines every week.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that makes sense. The thing is that, I swam at Michigan State and knew a lot of the Michigan swimmers, and back in those days, we were, Michigan State, Ohio State, and then Indiana were, top schools in the country in swimming.
Sure.
And then, it changed a lot. Then a lot of it moved to the South and Southern Cal and Texas and so on. But in those early days, we were always competing and, made some good friends there. And, so but I still have the competitive spirit still in terms
Yes, you
of,
do.
but I don't like some of the rough talk that, is demonstrated now a little bit, and the self-denial, I almost feel as though it's QAnon, and I don't know where you come down on this, Dana, as a Republican in terms of all the hassles that we've had, but the reality in terms of the truth, it's when I grew up, the truth was the truth, and you accepted it.
Right.
It's a different story.
You remember the part J.J. Dooling said that he met Walter Cronkite? That was on
really?
the July meeting.
I didn't remember that. No.
J.J. Dooling said he was on an elevator. My God, it's Walter Cronkite. He goes, he didn't crap his pants there, but whoa, he goes, it was, it was his idol. And Walter gave the news, and that's the way it is.
Yeah.
On Thursday.
I've read the Cronkite biography, and it's fascinating. I really admired what he did and how he did it, and that was a space and time. We'll never have that kind of journalism or that kind of anchoring again.
No, you never will. And it's and we did a good job, at VIC with Bob, his background in news. And, I can remember when he put that hour newscast on.
Right. Uh-huh.
And people just laughed, until we started winning all the awards. And, and it was unbiased by and large, and it's something that has always been important to me. It's kind of one of the reasons that I got out of broadcasting. And, I stayed active on the board of directors at the MAB after I was president. But it was with the ownership rules being relaxed. I was not particularly in favor of that because I knew what was going to happen. I wasn't afraid that somebody was going to become, a Sinclair Broadcasting or something. At that time, I wasn't. But
right.
But I was concerned that that there would be, the control room of 3 radio stations in one building, and you'd have one manager, and and everything would be combined. And I just didn't think you could do a good job that way. But
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Joe, you're absolutely right, because I lived that life, right?
Yep.
When I first got back into radio in Detroit as a general manager, that was when I left JBK and became the general manager of WNIC and WKQI. I was fine with that because those were the 2 properties I was responsible for. They were in separate buildings, so they had their own distinct personalities that were not necessarily commingled. I had to be the commuter, but I managed to do that. But then that's when we got absorbed ultimately by Clear Channel. And then the whole idea of everybody being in a consolidated location was the dictate. It wasn't even suggested as a good idea. It was says, no, this is what you're going to do.
yeah,
And so I found a space, a very nice building, which was formerly the A&W Root Beer corporate headquarters in Farmington Hills. And it had only been, I think the building was only like 8 or 9 years old, and they had been sold out to that, the Yum Group, which included A&W and KFC and whatever. So here's this beautiful building. By the way, when A&W was owned and that building was built, it was built by Al Taubman because he was the owner at the time.
yeah.
So he built a beautiful facility. So we had already, when I discovered this place, Dan is here. Holy mackerel.
Hey, Dan.
Hi, guys.
Dan, the man Caruso.
I'll be darned. The guy who should be president of Michigan State.
That's right. My former roommate at McDonald Hall.
There you go.
It's great to see you, buddy.
Good seeing you. Haven't seen you in a long time, Scott. How you been?
I'm getting old just like everybody else.
Oh, he's fine and fabulous. That's what
Join
he
the
is.
club.
Well, it's so good to see you, Dan.
Yeah, you're looking terrific,
Good to
buddy.
see you guys too.
Man, this is great to have you on board. I'm really excited that you're here.
We've just been chatting about Michigan State and life in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, they played a
Dan-
good game last week, didn't they?
Yep, they
Let's see
did.
what they can do this.
Yeah, it's what, 19.5 spread?
Yeah.
I think that's correct.
Yeah. I've really been impressed with obviously what he's done with the team,
Yeah.
but Ohio State is still Ohio State. And,
Yeah.
and it was interesting. I was listening to a discussion today and somebody said, they didn't pay him that kind of money because of Michigan. They paid him because that they want to get in the deep end with Ohio State. If your decision is to that you want to win championships, that's who you have to go after.
Right.
You may have a good rivalry down the road, but but so far they haven't shown that that they're going to win any championships again. Right. So it'll be interesting to see. But he's right. It's Alabama, Oregon with Knight's money and that you have to mix it up with.
Well, when you can get someone like Matt Ishbia and the other gentleman, St. Andre, to come up with the dollars to make the $95 million contract come together, that's
Isn't
pretty
that
incredible.
crazy? That's
That's
crazy.
not the place where Michigan State has played before,
No, it hasn't.
I don't even know if it's a good idea that, donors are throwing their money in that direction, but I guess when you have those kinds of incredible resources, you can kind of do that. And Matt Ishbia, to his credit, he made a $32 million gift not too long ago. And, a lot of money is in this last 6 months has been poured specifically by major donors into the football program per se and directly.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
I wish that we had a swimmer that made a lot of money.
Yeah.
I
I mean, is that a done deal, Joe? I mean,
yeah, it is. They're
Yeah.
still trying to work on it, but and there's still some people that would like to have it happen. But a number of years ago, when Hollis got in, and took over as athletic director. I tried to talk to the administration about upgrading the facilities. The swimming facilities in Michigan State are not as good as some of the high schools in Lansing. So,
Right.
and it was unfortunate because at one time when I was there, and even before, because I grew up in East Lansing, and I lived right next to the door to the swimming coach, and so we used to go over there when they were building the IM building and the outdoor pool, and that was state of the art when it was built, but it was built in the 50s, and so they just got away, and you can't recruit top athletes if you don't have decent facilities, and especially in a sport like that, because of the fact that you got to have, if you only have 6 lanes, when Eastern Michigan has 10, to give you an idea of some of the comparison. And they weren't very, I couldn't budge them, because at that point they had made the decision that if we're going to help a sport, the alumni have to make the major contributions. And I understand that to a degree, but the problem is that when your program has gone from, we were 3rd in the nation when I was there, and they were normally like last or second to last in the Big Ten with the swimming, and the alumni, the first question is, well, when are we going to start getting a coach in there and start doing things that are going to be meaningful before I start spending my money.
Right.
So it was, because we didn't have anybody that had was a multi-billionaire. It just, and and of course all the crap that went on with Nasser and and Engler and everything there, they just use it as an easy way out. They cut it, and it's not unusual. I mean, it's the only school in the Big Ten that's done it, but around the country it's happened. So I'm afraid that until somebody does come along that wants to spend that kind of money to build new facilities, but they should be interested in building new facilities just to keep up with the times, and it's something that the students use. And that's what Eastern Michigan did. They paid for their facilities with they charged the students a fee to use the facilities, and works very successfully. And I proposed, I said, look, at that time, when I was talking with them, that there wasn't a lot of the high schools hadn't upgraded their facilities in Lansing, but and I said, why don't you work with the city of East Lansing, develop an aquatic center?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Where they would have a beautiful aquatic center for someone to go to, and swim, and the students could use it as well as the teams, and they weren't that creative. And normally Hollis is, but I didn't work with him anyways. I mean, I can't really blame him. I exchanged letters, but I worked with one of the other people there. I don't even recall his name now, but no, so I knew it wasn't going to get done. But
are you still swimming, Joe?
Yes. Yeah. As a matter of fact, that's, I had a consulting firm, and was working there, and then kind of retired from that. And I said, geez, I want to do something. And so I started a business where I give swimming lessons and coach.
Oh,
and,
good for you.
And really it's been rewarding. What happened was, I thought that initially I just wanted to stay busy, and I thought maybe I'll, give lessons to kids probably. But it turned out that what happened was I started giving lessons to adults who didn't know how to swim. And it was just inundated by people that never learned how to swim and wanted to learn.
Yeah.
and there's no place for them to go,
That's true.
so it really, I had more business than I could handle, especially, in the summertime. And I had to cut back because it was getting to be too much. But I also work with a number of kids that are normally in junior high school that want to go on and swim in high school. And so this summer I worked with 3 of those kids and prepared them for, moving into high school and swimming on the swim team. So it's really been rewarding. And it's been rewarding to see these adults who, that in some cases they break down and cry, because everybody tell them, swimming is one of those things that everybody says, oh, it's easy if they can do it, and if somebody has issues with it, it's not easy to them. And, I just got through working with a woman that almost drowned 3 times. And she wanted to learn how to swim, but it was a monumental effort to get her to be able to put her face in the water. But, you just take your time, relax with them, encourage them, and everybody can do it in most cases. So yeah,
He also
fun.
worked with a Navy SEAL who was hoping to qualify to get into the SEALs.
Oh,
And-
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, the SEALs have, all the special forces, they have very stringent physical tests, PT tests, and most everybody can do the other stuff, but their swimming test is really tough. And and they do a stroke, especially in the Navy, in the SEALs, that's called a combat side stroke with full gear, including weapon on.
Yeah.
And they have to do that stroke, and some of the times are amazing. I was fortunate enough a few years back to win a national championship, and in the mile, in masters. And, and let me tell you, there were a lot of people that swam, that were competitive swimmers that couldn't make that test with these guys, because it's very unique and very unusual. So that was kind of rewarding too. I worked with a number of SEALs, and I worked with a lot of triathletes who are good runners, good cyclists, average swimmers. And so that's been interesting too. So it's kept me busy.
That's terrific.
I got a question then. So, Joe, we want to hear from you, your good memories at WVIC, also what you did since WVIC. Cynthia, same thing for you. And also, we got Scotty, the hugger. Same thing for you, kind of the same format we did last time. But also, I want to throw out a couple of questions. Answer it when you're talking. But Joe, how's the book coming on WVIC? I want to know more about the history of it because that was so exciting. Hugger, who is Sparty? Does it change all the time? Tell us a little history on Sparty when you get your time. Cynthia, I remember Fred Moy and Jim Wall were fellow salespeople. Tell us more about that. And also, Joe, tell us about the award-winning news department at WVIC. You and I got in discussion once because it seemed like you were the proving ground, and then they went to WJR. You hired them, and then they got hired away by a bigger company on that. And then also, who was the one who got Paul Harvey to be broadcast at our station? And also tell me about Rusty in the back office. Tell us your memories. And one thing Dr. Steve talked about last time, I didn't know this. Dr. Steve was the general manager at WOWO, and he got promoted. They hired a replacement for him, and he said it was a guy named Joe Bias from Lansing.
If you live long enough, that happens, right, Joe? I mean, the circle completes if you live long enough.
Oh, doesn't it though? And Bob Price was a real gem who owned that station. And
That's putting it nice.
Yeah.
A gem is in quotes.
Yeah. Yeah. And and Steve, because
Yeah.
after what had happened was he came in. I don't know how you managed, and gutted the station, really.
Oh, yeah.
And some of it was owned by Westinghouse, and they were spending way too much money in a lot of areas,
Right.
because it was a flagship station, 50,000 watts, and
it was part of their manager training network. That's why they over resourced WoWo.
That's right. And then so when I got there, what they were running, canned news, they were running a trucker show at night, and religion and all sorts of stuff, and now they had, farm news, but that was, first of all, it was a moneymaker.
Yes.
Right, Steve?
Yeah.
And
let me tell you the quick story, Joe. When I got there,
Sure.
the tap rate for WoWo when I arrived, Monday through Friday, 6 a, 7 p, the tap rate was $43. And our farm rate, which was 5 to 6 a.m. and noon to 1, the rate for that, because that was agribusiness dominated, was $470 a spot.
Oh,
Wow.
Yeah.
Paul Harvey rates.
Yeah.
Paul Harvey couldn't touch that.
That's right. Paul Harvey, incidentally, Dana, he was part of the ABC networks. And when we took the contemporary network at VIC, and but he was on, I can't remember which network he was on, but because he was their best show, they gave him to us to broadcast. And so because he was popular, obviously they kept him on, it was kind of like the farm thing, and I'm trying to think, Steve, what was the name of the show, the music, the in-studio music show?
The Little Red Wagon.
Oh, the Little Red Barn.
Little Red Barn. God, I couldn't remember. I did an interview with Charles Osgood about that.
Mhm.
He was doing, and I don't remember if it was the news. I think it was CBS News came in, and that show was, the ratings were through the roof on Sunday morning. I mean,
yeah.
50% of the audience, it seemed like. And
Exactly right.
In studio band, and the people that ran it were, just the greatest people in the world. And and so that one you kept, and it was kind of like the hour news on at VIC,
Right.
and the thing is that those, anomalies, people who are strict to format, tell you, well, you don't do that sort of thing. Well, you can, if you do it good, and the difference is that radio is a medium that you've got to use. And so majority of stations, they rip the wire off and put a guy before a microphone, and he reads the wire, and that's the news, and we did with Walt Sorg and
Paul Weisenfeld
and Chris McClure.
George
they went
Blaha
out
Sports.
and they very much modeled themselves after NPR. If you notice that on NPR, if they're interviewing somebody, you can hear noises in the background, of where they are. And so there was always something, an image they were creating with their audio. And so that was the kind of thing that they did, that we did. And it got a lot of people that listened to it, because it was done well. And it won just major awards, for a number of years there, until, then it got scaled back a little bit after Bob left, obviously. And Paul Weisenfeld, I had to fire him because he got mad at something. He was mad always at someone. And went out the parking lot and stood there during the news.
Well, that Joe, I was on the air that afternoon.
Were you really? I didn't remember that.
And what happened was I was filling in for St. John. I don't remember if this was during St. John's discovery period when he left us for a while to go discover himself, but I was on the air and Weisenfeld, like you said, was torqued about something. And he came up because I was getting ready for the 5:30 newscast and he said, I'm out of here. And he left. And so Mary Niels Frumkin was like the only one in the building. And I ran to her while the record's on. I said, Mary, we got the news in 3 minutes. I don't know what the hell to do. And so she went downstairs and grabbed whatever copy had already been prepped, plus the actualities. And then she just brought a bunch of teletype copy up from the wire. And she goes, here's like a couple stories that are already done. And she goes, and I'll just continue to rip these things up and hand them to you. And so that is how I did the 5:30 news that day. And I was rather proud that it actually came together with, I was reading everything cold. I have no idea what story was coming next. I had no time to proof any of it, but we put all the actualities in plus the AP wire copy. And that got me up to 45 after the hour. And, the sportscast was already in the can. So I didn't have to sweat after that, but Paul pulled that off, and just decided to walk out over some snit that I don't even know what it was.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was either, but I couldn't have it, and so.
Hey, Dana, quickly give me a screen share. If you give me screen share privileges, I've got some nice things. I want to see if I can share something with everybody. Go ahead, Joe. I didn't mean to.
That's all right. The other thing that was interesting that came up last time that I can clarify a little bit, I probably shouldn't, but I will anyways, was Jim St. John. I knew about what had happened. Jim had met his wife, who was a high school student at Catholic Central, I think it was, and met her at a hop and fell in love. And, and Jim was not a guy to fall in love much. I mean, he would tell me
he was a lover, all right.
Yeah, he would climb. He told me the stories of climbing out bedroom windows and everything. And and he, but he came into me and he said, I think this is for real. And he said, I've got to find out whether it is or not. And so I quit. And I'm going to. Linda and I are going to go out and, I'm going to really see what this is all about. And I said, I'm not going to let you quit. I said, I'll tell you what I will do is that you can take the time, go out. And I said, but you got to call me every other day and let me know what you're doing and how things are going. And, and then come on, and then decide what you want to do then. They left and all of a sudden, one day, about 2 days after that happened, the receptionist, I think it was Darla at the time, said, there's a Linda, I can't remember her last name at the time, father here, and she would like to talk to you. And so her father came in my office and he said, my daughter has been kidnapped by one of your disc jockeys, that kind of thing. And I knew that Jim was serious, and I also knew that he was a good guy, and so I told him I told him the story, and I said, I'll tell you what, I'll keep you apprised. I'll let you know what's going on. I said he really loves your daughter, and he'll take care of her. You don't need to worry about safety or anything else. So I maintained a dialogue with that, and then Jim let me know that he was ready to come back, and that he and Linda were going to get married, so and they stayed married, so yeah, it worked out well. But that was an interesting time. I know people were very confused on what was going on at that time.
You were really a very enlightened leader, Joe, in those days. I mean, that's the kind of boss I really enjoyed having.
Yeah.
You're thinking about the whole person, and a lot of us didn't know all those dimensions of Jim. He's been a very attentive friend. I hear from him every Christmas.
Yeah,
I hear from him a couple times a year. I'll get a text from him, and that all started when I was coming back from some road trip, and I was on the last leg from Detroit to Lansing. and we were both in the very front seats. He was on one side and I was on the other. And he goes, "Hey, Hugger, how are you?" And I didn't even realize it was him. And he told me, he was kind of like shaking his head. And he said, "I never in a million years would have thought I would ever have made this much money doing what I've been doing for so long." He says, "I just would never have thought that would have been what I would have grown up to do."
Yeah.
But and Colleen and Linda were buddies because she worked at she was a X-ray tech, I think.
Oh,
Correct me on
hospital.
that. Yeah, at the
Yeah.
clinical center, and they'd
Yeah.
run into each other from time to time. So, yeah, I mean that guy did grow. He did. The opportunity you gave him to find himself, I think, was probably a turning point in his life.
Well, he was and he was a good friend, and and I remember the time that when I brought Errol Kaufman in.
Oh, God.
Oh, yes. Well, Joe,
No,
that might be a little mark on your shining career.
Yeah, well, I gotta
Nobody's
tell you,
perfect.
I was gonna say something on that.
BIC.
but I guess it was when Ron White did some work for it, as I recall. And Jim was not, because that's when he was program director. And I said, he called me up one night and said, "Look, I don't think this is particularly a good move. I don't think he's going to help us anything, and so on." I said, "Okay, you do a favor for me. I want you just to make sure you do everything that he says you should do." And I said, "And I'll make a decision. If it doesn't work, I guarantee you he'll be gone." And he was true to his word. And Ron helped. He brought some stuff in.
Yeah, he did. Because
Yeah,
I
he
was
did. He brought
working
some
Ron's
discipline.
system as the music director. So I was
Yeah.
getting a lot of the instruction from Ron White.
Yeah. And so, and I had known Ron for a number of years. And so it's, it was interesting. And in fact, Grand Rapids, I was born in Grand Rapids, didn't live there, but I worked at Wood radio out of college. And so I was familiar with it. And of course, Morris buys WZZR in Grand Rapids, and for a while I ran both stations going back and forth. Cynthia had an advertising agency there. She was my advertising agency for ZZR, and then when I went to WOWO, I hired Chuck Bailey, who is Wood WOD's morning man, and brought him into Fort Wayne because he had grown up in Fort Wayne, and he had great ratings in Grand Rapids, and so I brought him up. So I had a connection with Grand Rapids quite a bit. But Errol Kaufman was, when I was a youngster, I was interested in theater, and so Michigan State had they called it Toy Shop Theater, and I would try out for plays, and we would do a number of different plays. And Errol Kaufman also was in that, and so I knew him there in terms of we were in a number of plays together and so on as I was growing up, and we both got kind of the bug off from that, I guess. He went into radio. I was asked to be on WKR's TV station. They had a show each Christmas, around Christmas time, that where I can't remember the guy's name who had the show, but he would go to Broadway and see a number of Broadway shows and come back and report on them. And he asked me if I would come on his show as one of the characters that I was playing in the Toy Shop Theater, and that's my first exposure to broadcasting, and really got the bug, was bitten by the bug. And my high school had a radio and television class, and the instructor made everybody read an article from broadcasting or a broadcasting publication, and report on it every week. And so I was initiated into the business side of broadcasting as well. And don't ask me why, but I was just taken by being in sales and in the management issues, you know, and so that's what I went in when I came to state. I wanted to go in the management track, and Leo Martin was, you know, the chairman of the department at the time, and he was consulting WGN and so on. The only disagreement or discussion that Leo and I had when I was in graduate school, he wanted me, Dana, about WVIC. And he
See, if you had only started then.
Yeah. And had wanted me to do it as my dissertation, you know, and,
Wow.
and take that track. And I said, Leo, let me tell you something. If I told you what we, you know, if I wrote a book in terms of what was done at that radio station, you know, you could never live again in terms of the broadcast industry. I said, you know, when you consult WGN, your problems are, you know, you have 500,000 of excess capital. What are you invested in? How are you going to depreciate the equipment? You know, and I said, at VIC, it's Friday afternoon. We've got half the payroll in, and we can only pay half of the people all that's owed them, or pay everybody part of what we owe them, you know, and that was the decision that we were making. And I don't know if any of you guys ever heard about it, but for a long time, we got paid by someone would pay, when a client would pay us, and Bob would sign a check over, and give it to an employee to cash it.
Oh,
And
wow.
Wow.
I went, you know, I didn't earn a lot of money at that time at all. You know,
I think you guys were legit by the time we start getting paid full time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dan and myself and Scott for sure.
Yeah. And then eventually, you know, all of a sudden the thing took off, and then we did start making money. But there were a lot of days, and what we would do is, you know, a lot in the summertime, we had a grill out back. And so we'd go and buy a hamburger, and he'd make
Or
hamburger,
trade it.
throw them on the grill, and, you know, and
Right.
Jane Sorrell would make potato salad. That's why she was called the potato salad queen. And I mean, we all had nicknames, you know.
Yeah.
I was called Funny Shoes because I used to wear shoes that were black and white.
Yeah.
And, you know, Cynthia was Horse Lady. She is equestrian.
Yeah.
You know, Bob always had these names for everybody. And, but it was, you know, it was a real family at that time. And, and the station was put on the air by Don Jones, who was an attorney in Lansing, and his son was named Victor. And so that's where the call letters came from, WVIC.
Okay.
And
Like WJIM.
yeah, that's right. And it, you know, and it had the AM station, of course, was the main product at that time because FM was just coming in, you know, and we were all automated on FM. The automation system was right in front of where the studio windows were, so that somebody could be on the air and they could watch the reels and see if they were running out and go and change them. You know, beautiful music. And so and I went to work there as a salesman. Bob was program director. And there was, oh God, who was the manager? He was an old jock from JIM, and it escapes me, but he was Jewish. And Bob Sherman, one time he would get back, they do back and forth. And Bob was a conservative. I don't know how many people know that or not, but he was a real arch conservative. And he said they were talking about the Holocaust, and Bob said something like, you know, you believe that? all those people were killed.
Ooh.
And they,
Oh, hold on.
No.
And then there was, I met with him, and I wish I could remember the guy's name. And I used a term, a Yiddish term, and I don't even remember which one it was. It was, maybe I wasn't schmuck. It was,
What?
no, it was something else. But, and I didn't know it. And he informed me of that. And I did not get in his good graces. So what happened was Jane Sorrell was working with us there. We had two extraordinary engineers that worked at VIC. One was John Hanley.
Yep.
The other one was John Stewart. And John Stewart he was not as good technically as John Hanley was in terms of fixing things. But he was good, and he was a whiz in terms of he knew every rule and regulation. He became an FCC attorney.
Oh.
But we got together, we went to see Don Jones, and we wanted him to make Bob Sherman the manager and fire this guy. And it was one of those things where everybody was there. I was the spokesman. And it was one of those that I said, and all these people are behind me. You know, I just somehow I was the last person standing there. And so it didn't happen right away, but and I left. And I think that's when I went back to work my graduate degree. And that Bob came in and finally did become manager and accept, and called me to come in as sales manager. But there was, Al Wendrow, excuse me. Al Wendrow, I don't know if any of you ever met him.
No.
But he was one of the owners. Gus Kanakis was an owner.
Oh, no kidding.
Oh, yeah. And in fact, Gus, Al Wendrow, and Bob and I would go and do football games. And I would do color. Al would keep stats. And Gus would do games sometimes. In fact, one time, I remember we had a game against Washington, I think. And we were out on the coast and did the game. And I grabbed a red eye back home, and it was I remember it was one of those flights from hell, in terms of late at night. And so we did that. And but Al Wendrow was an interesting individual, and was kind of a very colorful character. But there were a lot of them, believe me, in terms of the owners. And eventually, they finally left us alone, and we were able to kind of do our thing. But it was, but those early years were really interesting years. And Jack Hines was, he was the newsman when he went to work for McClendon, and he was on the history of rock and roll. They had a bit where he did a thing that said, it was the nuclear, there's been a nuclear explosion and the cloud is moving across the United States. But first, a message from our sponsor. And, but he was strange. Almost everybody that we had Bill Light,
Yeah.
and a number of people that, and a lot of them that went on to do very well, at other stations. And the other major thing that we had is when Jim Morris came in,
Right.
Yeah.
that there was a Citizens United
Oh, dear God.
wanted to go after almost everybody that's licensed in Lansing, and they wanted to take on JIM, and they wanted to come in and try to get our employees. Cynthia, that they talked to you, right?
Oh, yeah.
She was in
Really?
sales at that time, yeah. And
Hey,
Well,
Dana, can you put us back in like the normal thing so we can see each other like
Yeah.
big? Because this is, I'm having trouble seeing people here. Must be I'm spending too much time on my screen writing.
yeah,
Is that better?
So they talked to you, Cynthia?
yeah, they did. This was Sue.
Carter.
Sue Carter had gotten fired
Hmm.
for whatever reason and started working in Detroit at that time. They approached me and said, you know, as a female working for the radio station, how do you feel about it? So we spent some time talking about it. And the following week, I was at work. Jim came into my cubicle and he said, I understand you've been talking to some people from Washington, and, you know, their lawyers can be awfully tricky. Why don't I have our attorney take a look at whatever they want you to sign?
Hmm.
And it infuriated me. And I said, Jim, if you've done anything, you've encouraged me to sign it. Got up and walked out the room.
Good for you. Way to go.
So anyway, and Jim was, he's a wonderful guy, but he was, a football player at Notre Dame, and tough as nails. And his first reaction was confrontation,
Right.
and I said, look, let me handle it, and because they wanted to form a advisory committee, a minority advisory committee. And I said, fine, that's great. We'll let them do it. And we got some people from Crystal Ray for the Hispanic community, and I don't remember. B.R. Mathena wasn't part of that.
He was probably
No,
arrested
because the
by
police were
Yeah.
after him.
Yeah.
No,
You know, El Daco.
but they had the NAACP and so on. We had a great group, and so what I would do with them is I would call a meeting, and I would give them assignments to do. We would like this. I need you to do this and this. We want to develop a hiring program and so on. And they never got back to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
That's
that's
how it
work.
works. Yeah.
They like to be part of the committee, but
Yeah.
they didn't want to do any work,
Yep.
and so and also they were upset about Sue, and I, with Sue, I offered her job back.
Yeah.
And I said, if you believe that you've been, and unfortunately or fortunately, and I'm not telling her whether I knew about this or not. She had been offered a job in Detroit,
Mhm.
and she said, no, I think I'll go to Detroit and work there. But yeah.
What a neat lady she is, though. I mean, if you look at her career,
Oh yeah.
she has done so many things.
Oh, she's
Yeah.
tremendous.
Renaissance woman for
Great-
sure.
great lady.
Yeah.
And
She's in Paris right now.
and-
Today's her birthday.
Yes, it
Oh,
is.
is it
Today's
really?
her
Is it
birthday.
really?
Get on Facebook and wish her a happy birthday tonight.
Oh, I will.
And do any of you remember Lambert?
Oh, Danny Lambert. Yeah.
Danny
Yeah.
Lambert.
Oh my gosh.
You know the story about him.
No.
When he freaked out at the Capitol, right?
Yeah, he was found at night in his underwear
Uh-oh.
with a Bible, preaching and trying to convert people to Christianity.
Oh my God.
And so that was a tough one in terms of,
No kidding.
There was never a WKRP episode that did that.
let me tell you, that's why I said the book would be great, because that show had nothing on us.
That's right. That's right.
So
That's
I-
fantastic.
I met with his wife, and he had a breakdown. He was a good newsman, great voice. That
Robert
people-
Lambert. Yep.
Yeah.
and he and I told his wife, I said, get him some help. you know,
Yeah.
he's got his job when he gets better. And it was not a long progressive kind of a thing. It was a short-lived thing. I don't know exactly what had happened. I never, obviously was never brought to date on the exact issue, but and when he came back to work, he was at work for probably a month, and then he went to Detroit. So yeah, and that's always the problem of hiring people that are good, but you can't shy away from that.
No.
It's you've got to hire good people, and the time when we hired
China Smith.
China Smith,
Yes.
and I hired him. I was in Vegas at an NAB meeting, and I get a call from China Smith, and he's supposed to make it. He was working on the coast, and he was driving back to Lansing to start his first day. And he said, I stopped by in Vegas. I had to go to the bathroom. And he said, I went in to one of the casinos and to go to the restroom. And in the restroom, I had an envelope with money, and I put it down to go to the bathroom, and somebody stole it. And I don't have any money. And I said, look, if you think I believe that story, you don't know that I did not fall off the cabbage truck. And so I said, I will wire you the money to get to work, but you better make it there before I get back. And we did. He got there, but he was also very flighty. He was very strange. And
He took a week off when his cat died. Now I understand that. Makes perfect sense to me.
Mhm.
But most broadcasters would not understand that. What do you mean he's mourning his cat? Well, he cared about his cat.
So he also eventually went, I think, to Detroit for somebody. But we've always, I've said this, we've, always had great people that work for us. And, it was my pleasure to work with, you people and all the others that have passed through the station. If nothing else, they brought great stories and enriched my life a great deal. And I years ago I said I was going to write a book, and I just never have sat down and done it. And it would be hard to sell as being real, but
People will buy it. I mean, of all the books I've written, the book that I wrote about the history of Kino 13, which is mostly music guides, continues to sell like crazy. And I have no idea why. I don't promote it or anything, but it's my #1 seller on Amazon by a mile. I sell about 10 a week. Yeah, it's just music guides. And at the end of every year, I wrote a little, I took something from the website about a DJ and I put a little trivia stuff in there, but it's
almost as long as the Grapes of Wrath.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
500 and some pages. Yeah.
That would be a great resource,
Yeah.
So
Well, and that's why that oral history, probably the way to do it is for you to sit down with somebody, and just record. I mean, that's kind of how we did my dad's autobiography. Is he was driving back alone from Arizona or something and had a cassette player, and he just started, stream of consciousness. And when he got back, we had it transcribed, and that became the book.
Great idea.
Yeah. And you could, especially Cynthia with you, all you got to do is egg him on. Right.
Which you've always done.
To ask. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. My daughter gave me a book called Your Father's Book. And it's a book of series of questions.
Okay.
And
I do egg him on about this one.
And so I've been going through that and writing in that a little bit, so that she has a record of stuff, and she can share with my youngest daughter. But
There's even an easier way to do it. Last Christmas, I gave Colleen a Storyworth subscription, and they send you a question every week. And
Oh,
so
really?
she'll write that down and send it to them. And so this Christmas, what we'll receive is a 52 chapter book.
That's
Wow.
great.
And it's the kind of questions like, you know, who was your first best friend? And they have a long list. If you don't want to use their question, the question that you get, you can go pick from it.
Sure.
But I mean, it would be like, I would love to learn more about your love affair with horses, Cynthia. We have a lot of people in our family who are horse people. And that would be fascinating to hear about how you first, when was the first horse that you rode and all that kind of stuff.
Well, we had, my family was very involved. We had my mother, my sister, my niece, and myself all rode, and we called the company The Guys and had a lot of fun with it. And they campaigned Arabians nationally.
Mhm.
And I went to the hunter jumper route, and I was the oddball, I suppose, but I loved, I love fox. I fox hunted on my 21st birthday, so yeah, it's a passion in my life.
Are you still involved?
Oh yes, it's
Mhm.
much cheaper than therapy. I have to be careful until I find out about this. Getting
Yeah.
sick.
It seems that the diagnosis is that she has an issue with her inner ear.
Ah, okay. Yep. Uh-huh.
Little crystals. Yeah.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
manageable though. You can
Yeah.
do something about that. Yeah.
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 Yeah,
So,
Lori had that too. My wife had that same problem with
Oh, really?
balance. She had Guillain-Barré in 1985. And part of what Guillain-Barré does is disturb the crystals in the ear, among other things. It also demyelinates all your muscles. So you lose all control over your involuntary muscles throughout your body. It paralyzes you for a period of time. And then, God willing, your body has the resiliency to bounce back from it. And that's what she was able to do. But she was in intensive care for 7 weeks and 6 months of physical therapy. After that, she lost her ability to see. She had quadruple vision. She was not able to walk. She was not able to talk. Every communication aspect of her, as well as her gait and her ability to grip things, all of that was compromised. We were living in Milwaukee at the time, and our boys, one was, Ryan was 4 years old, and Jamie was 6 months old.
Oh my Lord.
So it was really quite the thing. And but the whole issue of the ability of the crystals in the ear to throw off balance still, frankly, haunts to this day. We can't take cruises anymore. Because that was a permanent condition of her, the motion of the sea and what it does, even on a cruise ship, which is fairly balanced. It just stays with her for days and sometimes weeks after a cruise.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, but she's fine. I mean,
You wouldn't know it. Yeah, I mean,
you wouldn't know. I mean, that was the impact in 1985 in those initial years, and so we've just been more mindful since that time.
Well, and you were a little bit careful about you weren't sure whether she could take the COVID shots for that reason, right?
She had to take, she cannot take standard flu shots because they have a virus in them. But because we have mRNA in the Pfizer, we got Pfizer for the first 2 shots plus the booster. So she had no problems at all with that.
That's great.
By the way, since we're at a quick pause here, I'm going to call up. Did you give me a screen share?
Yes,
Dana?
sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to show you, if I can get it up here the right way. This is a PDF from a sales piece when I was at WVIC that I'm going to show you once I get it up to full render here. And this is the first panel. It says 40 years ago, this man got his start in radio. And then the next panel says his unique reporting style attracts a large audience of educated adults and professionals. He's heard, he's heard on 1,000 stations across the country, but only one in Fort Wayne. And now you know the rest of the story.
That's great. Well, you used to run the board for Mort when he'd subbed for Paul Harvey, right?
Yes. Yeah. That's, as a matter of fact, I made it quite a big deal, Joe, about Paul Harvey when I got to WVIC, because in my earlier days at Tower 92, excuse me, Alexa, stop. Thank you, Alexa.
Hey,
So when I
Google.
got to WoWo, and I had already engineered Paul Harvey News 6 weeks a year when Mort Krim was the substitute anchor, and got a chance to meet Paul years later. So when I got to Fort Wayne, I knew we were the Paul Harvey station, and I started making more noise with that, with the sales department. And because of the relationship I had established during my Detroit days, we couldn't get any promos or liners from Paul Harvey, because if he did it for, one station, you have to do it for 1,000 stations. So the policy was he wouldn't do it. So I called Paul's writer, Ron Gorski, who I was working with during the earlier days in Detroit when we were producing Paul Harvey News out of my studios in Detroit. And I said, Ron, I know what the rules are, but I'm calling in a marker here. If I write up some liners, would you see if Paul could record these? And he goes, we're going to only do this for you, Schram. And he says, I know there will be hell to pay because other stations will hear it and will start getting noise about it. And I said, well, let's just try it. So I wrote up a bunch of liners. He sent them back a couple of weeks later, and all the cuts that I outlined were all there. And then on the last cut on the tape, it says, cut 9, personal for Steve Schram. And so I put that on, and I listened to, and he goes, hello, Steve Schram. This is Paul Harvey. We just want you to know Angel and I are so proud of your career from the days at Tower 92 in Detroit to a fabulous career in Milwaukee, where you became a young general manager at the age of 30. And now you are at the crown jewel of Northeast Indiana, WOWO Fort Wayne. We are so happy for your success and your career. And we just want you to know, if there's anything that Angel and I can do for you, do not hesitate to call or ask. And one more thing, Steve. Good day.
Can you unshare for a second, Shramo? Just for a second.
Yes, let me turn that off. There we go.
That's
And
great.
I will
Right.
share this.
Oh, yeah.
Ah, there it is.
Talk
Yeah.
about that one.
So this
Wow.
was when Dick Purton was being inducted to the National Radio Hall of Fame in Chicago. All of us were going in for that. And Mort Krim was also at that event. And Mort came up to me, because we hadn't seen each other recently, and said, hey, Steve, have you ever met Paul Harvey? I said, no. I said, is he here? He goes, well, he's the benefactor that really started the Radio Hall of Fame in Chicago. He and Angel made sure it happened. And so I said, wow. So Mort trots me over, introduces me to Paul Harvey. And I tell him how I was the producer of his show when Mort was on vacation, and not in this picture, but in the next picture that I have with Lori and myself with Paul. He looks at me, and he's got the classic pregnant pause, and he looks at me, he looks at her, he goes, young man, I can see you married up. And he was just great. He was everything you would hoped he would be based on the iconic person that we know him of.
Sure.
Here's another one for you.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
my.
Oh,
You remember
Hey,
that, Dan?
Dan.
That was
Dan,
that,
I think I look pretty much like that.
that was back at we were at some pool, weren't we? Where were we? There was some city pool we did a remote at. I'm trying to remember what that location was.
I don't recall.
Yeah.
I just came across some photos of my run at, for presidency of Michigan State. In fact, I'll post them on the Lori was going through, my wife was going through a lot of old photos and stuff, and she came across this box, which I had saved and hadn't seen in 10, 15, 20 years, and pulled out newspaper articles from the Lansing State Journal and the Michigan State News. And you got behind me on that, Joe. I really appreciated that. We had flyers printed up every week and passed out on the campus, and I would speak every week at a different location. And Lash LaRue, I don't know if you remember Lash LaRue from
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
but I was supposed to speak at a rally. I had laryngitis, I couldn't speak, and Lash was going to speak with me. And there's a newspaper article, I think it was the Lansing Journal that covered it, and it was great. Lash was great. I went out there and banged on the podium and I'm screaming. I'm not screaming, but I'm just, hey, no, there you go. Who's got that?
I got that. I got everything, buddy.
Oh, did you? All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, I did this for about 2 minutes, and then Lash gets on the mic and goes, Dan says he's happy to be here today. And the whole thing went from there, downhill, I guess, or uphill. I don't know. It was great. And then we went up in the WVIC hot air balloon for the hot air platform, as we call it.
Oh yeah, Captain John Hall, right? Was that his name?
And the flighty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
those
John, I
were the
wanted
days.
to ask you a question. Maybe you know this or somebody else. When and how did Mark Shepard get into the picture as the PD?
Oh, Mark,
Gentlemen, before Joe gets into this, I need to go lay down. And
Okay.
I just want you to know that it's been great talking with all of you.
Thank
Great
you.
to see you, kiddo. Take care of you.
I'm fine. Yeah, he takes very good care of me.
Good, good. As he
Good
should.
night now.
All right. Take care, Cynthia.
Thank you.
take it easy.
I will.
That one you probably shown
yeah.
before.
Oh,
I wonder
yeah.
whatever happened to Dan Coyle?
That's a
Nobody
good question.
knows.
Nobody knows wherever that guy went. He disappeared.
I do know Rich Marshall is a friend of mine, was his roommate in college, and they still keep in contact. And I forget, he was a photographer, I think, for a New York newspaper or something like that.
Huh.
Rich was. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he's still around. I sent a Facebook friend request, but I haven't heard back on that. So
I'll be darned. Yeah, we're all in touch with Jim, Heavy Metal Kid. He's down in Tampa. He's running a Sandler sales thing down there, and it's done very, very well in that space.
with
I see him
Jim-
occasionally.
Jim who?
Yeah.
Jim Marshall.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Was he related?
Mark got involved. Basically, he was kind of by abdication. He was one of the first people that we had. In fact, I think he was on the air when I got there, if I'm not mistaken, when I returned back to the station. And of course, Mark was a big Michigan fan. He wears his football helmet on football Saturday, and he also was a germaphobe and really had, he had all sorts of medical stuff in the control room in terms of spraying. He would have been right at home in the pandemic era because he would have followed every guideline. Bob really still did everything, by and large, but he would advocate some of the stuff to Mark and let him do it. And I think Mark went with Bob when he bought the station in Battle Creek.
Oh yeah, that's right. A bunch of the old VIC people went down with him, didn't they?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Was Mark Shepard the one that did the hour of gold between 10 and 11 every day?
Yeah. I think yeah.
He was
Yep.
on 10 to 2. I know that. I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah. We, it's interesting. I had a lot of music when I took over WKS, or it was, I don't remember what the old call letters were, but the station right in Mount Clemens, and decided to go oldies with it. I had brought oh goodness, Paul Christie in
Yeah.
as the program director, but I had a lot of stuff, the music that we had used at VIC, and in fact, it when and then of course we built a tremendous list there at VIC, and when I went to WOWO and we went to oldies, because what I tried to do is recreate to a degree what people would remember, and they were brought up and lived on WOWO in terms of the top 40 music. And it really went well, you know, and we had, you know, good numbers in older adults, 25, 54. And till Bob Price called me and told me, he said, we aren't number one 18 plus. And I said, Bob, you're never going to be number one 18 plus in the metro, you know.
Those days are gone.
Yeah. So it, but he thought we should have been, you know, because that's all he knew.
Yeah, that's
He
right.
had, you know, Steve, as you know, he had a couple of people working for him that were pretty smart. And the problem was he was loyal to them and gave them stations of their own.
Like Ellen, you're talking about Ellen, aren't you? Ellen
Yeah.
Fader? Yep.
Yep. And, you know, and so what happened is all of a sudden that I was left with nobody, there was no cushion, you know,
Right.
and it was impossible to work with him. And the guy who he had running his Buffalo station, I don't know, maybe you remember him. I don't remember his
Jim
name.
Meltzer.
Yeah, Meltzer. He put him in charge, and
Yeah.
that was it. So, but
Well, you know, I think that, you know, from my experience working with Bob, first of all, Jack McSorley hired, because he was running the radio group for Bob. And I got there in Fort Wayne, and 90 days later, Jack decided to leave and start his own radio enterprise. And so all of a sudden, just like you had, you know, none of us got direct supervision from Bob Price for any length of time. And all of a sudden, Ellen Fader was assigned to WOWO. We were her first station assignment. And quite honestly, God bless her, she didn't know anything to give any counsel or advice on. And that was very difficult to navigate when you were talking to someone who's bright, but not informed about what we were trying to get done, and didn't understand competitive circumstances, and they, you know, because they were in New York, they just figured that WOWO, the way they bought WOWO, should be the way it should always stay, without any challenge from any competitors, which was not realistic, especially, as you know, Joe, at the time, Magic, WAJI, was, you know, just stirring it up and doing a good job. So
Yeah.
it was a difficult circumstance.
yeah, it was tough. And we lost, you know, Paul Harvey to them.
Yeah.
But they finally, because they had, you know, they have monster numbers. The younger audience. Now, Paul Harvey was, you know, had an older audience, and maybe that's why they wanted him. But we lost Paul Harvey because of that. And so it was tough, and it, you know, it was tough trying to sell the TSA, you know, and that's what you're doing. You could do it with the fun stuff and you know, and some other things, but in terms of when you just don't have that young metro audience, it's very difficult. But it was a fun time, and I enjoyed working at the station, you know. Then I you know, that I had pretty much had it, you know, in terms
Sure. Yeah.
of broadcasting, and Cynthia was doing some consulting. And she was working in Grand Rapids for the Employers Association. That was an organization that did training and other things provided for member businesses. And she was, that's when I was in Fort Wayne too. And she was in Grand Rapids. I was in Fort Wayne. We still had the house here in Detroit. And so we were, you know, traveling back and forth, crossing paths. One time we'd meet one place and then on the weekend the other. But it was a hectic period, and I decided finally. I said, you know, why don't I start consulting with you, and you know, we can broaden it out. And you know, I thought about doing it in broadcasting, but broadcasters really weren't interested. You know, they were interested in if you were an engineer or if you were a program director, you could consult, but they didn't know what a management consultant was,
Right.
and so, and it's difficult, and it's a difficult business. I have learned more because a large percentage of our clients were automotive, because me being in Detroit, and so I've learned a lot about automotive in terms of business wise, but we had a wide, broad base of clients, and we pretty much concentrated in the human resource area, leadership, communication, sexual harassment, workplace violence. I got losing my voice. I've got a little bit of
And these
laryngitis.
days, Joe, you would be consulting on DEI matters.
Yeah, that's right.
Because that has taken the forefront. And,
Yep.
And recently when I hired a director of finance and HR, we actually purposely put the title in reverse as director of human resources and finance to show that there was an emphasis in that direction. And as you know, if you witnessed everything going on in this country in the last couple of years, just that has to be the new focus, because especially for younger employees, they are very much attuned to wanting that to be a priority as to how an organization frames things.
Yeah.
Hey,
That,
Doc, I interrupt. I just got a question. This week, the LCC radio station changed format, and they're carrying Michigan radio.
Yep.
Tell me about that. And also, is that a direct competitor to WKAR?
Well, it all depends on how WKAR views me.
That's a great answer.
Friendly fellow.
Maybe that's why John or Patty Hanley aren't here tonight.
Well, and Joe, this goes back to John Hanley. So, about a year and some months ago, we were hearing that Lansing Community College is running a $10 million deficit, and they had planned to no longer financially support WLNZ, the station that they put on the air back in 2010. And so when I was hearing that, or I think I read it in a local online thing, I didn't know anybody at LCC, but I did know John Hanley, and he had been their chief engineer. He's the one that put the station on the air, figuratively as well as literally.
Yeah.
And so I called up John and I said, who should I talk to about this? And he gave me a name, and I made an outreach, and that person, was happy to return my call because I dropped John Hanley's name. And so, and she was a delight. She was like their senior vice president of business operations. And I started talking to her about this and just putting some ideas together just in a conversation with her. And at the same time, they were on a search for a new president for LCC. And she was one of the candidates for the presidency, to make things even more interesting. So as time went on, they finished up with the search and the recruitment, and they hired the gentleman who's now the president. They did not hire her. And so shortly after that, my calls weren't getting returned, and I learned that she had left the college. And now I'm having to start from ground zero with a person who was formerly in charge of procurement at LCC. And now they had upped her to this senior vice president of business ops. And so I start again with a conversation and building rapport with somebody that has really no operating knowledge of radio or of the radio station at LCC. So I just marked this on my calendar. From the first conversation I had with the predecessor to the point where we signed the agreement, it was 6 of conversation and negotiation of the agreement. The agreement negotiation period took 5.5 months. And basically it's a programming and management agreement where LCC continues to own the asset, the signal and the transmitter and obviously the antenna. And we're doing all the programming 24/7, except we lop off 4 hours on the weekend, 2 hours on Saturday midday, and 2 hours on Sunday evening. And LCC will produce their own local programs that will air only on WLNZ. So that, the FCC finds favor with that, as opposed to taking over 24/7, 365. And I, as part of the response to an RFP, I put together a schedule so that they have underwriting announcements, a bank of underwriting announcements that we run across the whole Michigan radio network of stations throughout the course of the year. And we also made them cost neutral in the operation of the transmitter and the equipment facility. So they don't have any costs there. And we have become the chief operator, and we're doing all the maintenance and doing all the FCC requirements and provisions for them. So the final agreement went into force, and we did the cutover on Monday morning of this past week at 8 a.m. And so now it's Michigan Radio on WLNZ.
Interesting.
And I didn't have to reach into my pocket to make them an offer. So that's the backstory there, Dana.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Hey, Hugger, what have you been up to since WVIC? And tell us about some of your memories at WVIC.
Well, I would not be at WVIC if it weren't for my buddy Steve Schram, who convinced Joe Buys that we needed one more part-timer when he probably didn't. But that was the place where I learned the craft. I mean, I've never worked harder for anything in my life. It was something that I always wanted to do. And it was hard. It was very hard to learn the skills of being able to manage everything that was involved with a radio program, from putting the stops together in the right order to making sure the records started when they were supposed to, and then trying to think of something interesting to say that integrated with the format. And all those times that I ran board for remotes was great practice. It was really, really good. And I don't remember exactly when the switch flipped, but there was a moment at VIC when I figured it out, and they were, Jim and Joe were wonderful, very helpful to me at every step of my career. I went away for a while and I came back, and Steve's contribution was that he had the same outlook, I think, towards broadcasting that Joe did. And that was that we weren't disc jockeys, we were the radio announcers, and we were guys who were going to be in management. So we had to understand how the economics of the business worked. For a while, Joe let me have a list. I remember Craig Stillwell taking me out and helping me learn how to sell. And, John Handley, when we picked up ZZR, I helped him do the installation of the new production studio there. And we did some engineering stuff. And I think Steve, probably you and I don't know, Dan, did you help paint the tower at VIC while that was going on too?
Well,
Yeah.
John and I and Scott, I think it was the summer of 75 or 76, whichever summer that was.
Yeah.
We remember this, Joe. John convinced you of the merits that he would just have all of the long poles and cross member bars delivered on an 18-wheeler truck. We unloaded it out on the transmitter site out in Holt and put it together on top of some railroad ties by 30-foot sections.
Yep.
And we got he had his hydraulic wrench thing, and we got all those things all tightened up, and then got the big buckets of white and orange with car washing mitts and painted the sections of the tower.
Yeah.
We had a blast. It was so much fun. But the good news is it's still standing. You can when you drive down at 94, you can see it in the distance if you know where you're looking at towards Holt. And I remember climbing on it a little bit because, Hanley was going to hook up all the conduit for the wiring for the beacons.
Yep.
But after I went up, I don't know, 40 or 50 feet, and I said, you know what, John, they don't print enough money for me to do this.
Yeah. I think about the time we got married, that's when we lost our because now people were depending on us. Before that,
That's right.
Before Colleen, I was willing to shimmy that tower. I'd do it just for the view. Yeah, but that was, you guys gave me a really great grounding that helped me be very successful. I went for a while after Shelby was born. We lived in Cadillac, and I ran a station for Ken McDonald up there. And then cable happened in 1982, and I was just very lucky to be able to catch the wave. It was another one of those situations where they needed people, and they were willing to overlook shortcomings. So you could make a mistake and not lose your job. And I remember the fear really kicked in for me, Joe, when I started making more money than I knew I could make if I went back into radio. That's when it was the fear of failure versus the excitement of adventure. And
Well,
that
everybody
was-
thinks you make all sorts of money,
Yeah.
and especially on the air, right, guys?
Oh, yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I mean, you're all independently wealthy from being on
That's
the air,
right.
right?
Well, it was radio has always been a lot more fun now that it's not a requirement for, making a living.
Yeah.
Along the way in cable, I did a lot of stuff on the side when we were in Albuquerque. I actually worked for an oldies station, an AM station there, and did all their imaging and did a weekend shift and stuff that was voice tracked. And this past week, I finally bent to, I don't know if you guys know the name Ted Randall, but he's the guy that runs a shortwave station down near Nashville. And he brings these old DJs, Steve Hunter is on there, Jim Edwards, Jim Davis is on there, and they work from 8 to midnight. They voice track everything. And he's been bugging me to do Wednesdays. And so I started that a week ago. And that's been
I
weird.
listened. It sounds fabulous.
It's been weird. Well, I don't like that. The automation it's a voice tracking system, and I can't get it to, how, Dana, what a good tight board sounds like. I just can't get that board to work the way it should. So this past week I sent him tracks, completely produced tracks from
Completely
audition.
produced hours,
Yeah. Yeah. And
all
they're-
self-contained.
and it's really odd, Dan. You'll find this interesting because the way they make the most of their money is, of course, in the religious realm. So you'll hear me playing "Born to Be Wild," and then I'll go into the Ventures Hawaii 5-0, and I'll say more on the Scott Owens Show, and then there'll be the jingle, and it'll be, "Do you know Jesus? Have you thought about what's going to happen when you die?"
Yes. I'm familiar with the song "God, Love, and Rock and Roll."
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's all these ham radio commercials in the middle about, you need to buy this dipole for your house and stuff. It's just this odd, surreal thing, but
It's
played
the
in
price you
sandbox.
pay for having time in the sandbox.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I mean, the highlight, the radio highlights for Steve and me was how long ago is it now, Steve, that we started that website? Is it 17?
We started
years?
that in 2002.
Wow. That's a long time.
The Keener13.com website has been around now for 19 years?
Longer than Keener
Keener was
existed.
around for 9 years, and our tribute website has been around for 19
Twice.
years.
And that opened great doors for us. My dream was to work at Keener, and we got to do that. We did. There was during the Dream Cruise weekend, back when who was the PD? Dom Theodore, right?
Theodore, yep.
He gave us the keys to the building, and we recruited Bob Green, Pat St. John,
Bob
Scott
Barry.
Regan, Bob Barry helped out, and we put them all on the air. It was fun. So I mean that led to a couple of years after that. I was complaining to my wife about how radio sucks so much, and she said, "Why don't you just make your own station?" And that was the start of the Keener Secret Station project, which has been going on now for 15 years.
And Guy, you should send them the link to this, Scott, so that everybody can hear this. Because, by the way, and it's got an Alexa skill too. I listen to it virtually every day, and I was visiting some friends down in Florida, and I had it on my phone. I was listening to it, and they go, "What is that?" And then my friends were from Detroit, down in Florida. And I said, "Oh, that's Keener13.com. It's a recreation of Keener." And my friend Carl, who's a builder who grew up in Lansing, knew nothing of Keener. He said, "I must have that." And as Scott knows now, he listens to it incessantly.
All the time. He's on like 9-10 hours a day with the thing. And I don't even change the liners that much. So
it deserves to be a station on its own, standing on an FM frequency in Detroit. It would kick ass. It is so good. And I invite you to listen to it. Scott is the full 24/7 personality on this thing, but this thing hums like nothing you have ever heard before. It's got the original Keener jingles on it. Scott does great tribute shows on it, Rock Roll Revisited. And I love it. I mean, when I am just cranky and having a crummy day, I just put on Keener 13 on the stream, and everything is good again.
But all of that, all that began at
VIC.
WVIC. I mean, I had jobs before. I worked for Eric O at ILS, and we did campus radio, and I started out at Women's Pants and Girdles in Ann Arbor. But the place I learned the trade was at 2517 East Mount Hope. And, you know, before I got there, I thought that all radio stations smelled like hair chemicals because PAG was above a salon. And it wasn't until I left VIC that I didn't realize that all radio stations smelled like animal shelters.
And cigarettes.
And cigarettes, right? Yeah,
And
we never got
cigarettes.
that cigarette smell out, did we, Joe? It was,
Oh, God. No,
yeah, that was crazy. So that's what I, you know, other than corporate stuff and a few years at MSU, you know, now
So
I'm
Joe,
writing.
So we are all part of your legacy, Joe Buys. We're on the Joe Buys coaching tree.
Yep. Yeah, I think that when I go back and think about the pivotal people in my life where broadcasting is concerned, your light but firm kind of hand on the tiller was, you know, in broadcasting there are a lot of people that don't really care about your self-esteem. You know, we did not have a lot, and we've all worked for people like that throughout our lives. But I always got the sense that you were always interested in us and that you cared. And
I
that
appreciate
was
that.
something I took that into my own when I became a leader. That was something that was on my mind a lot. And you know, the story you've told about Jim, I have a long line of people in my corporate career that I had that same kind of conversation with about what do you really want? What's your real happiness? What do we need to do?
Yep.
And the story you told about Jim, the guy who's running the Albuquerque operation for Comcast right now is a guy that basically had almost a parallel experience to Jim. The difference for him was he was already married, but he was not succeeding. And my boss told me to fire him. And as we were going around New Mexico, because he was well liked by everybody, I was talking to him and I said, this doesn't feel right to me, Chris. We ought to, you know, what if you could do anything that would make you happy and still stay with Comcast, what would it be? And he said, well, I've always been good with the interpersonal stuff and with the community guys. So I went back to my boss and I said, I'm not firing him. I want to make him my government affairs guy. And so he did that and watched my leadership style from afar. He also had the institutional knowledge because he'd been there before. So he was very helpful with that kind of stuff. And when I left, they gave him his job back. And he now has a bigger responsibility than I had during my several years in the turnaround situation there. So that's part of your legacy, my friend.
well, I appreciate that. It's, you know, I enjoyed the consulting for them. That, you know, that people give lip service to the fact that people are your most important asset in terms of business, but a lot of people don't really believe it. And even past that, they don't know how to approach people. And there's no secret, you know, it's, you treat people like human beings, you know, and you understand that they have hopes and dreams and you know, as well. And you get to know them. You know, it doesn't mean you need to make friendships, you know, out of all employees,
Right.
but it means that you need to respect them. And, you know, and you'd be surprised the companies that I've worked at, you know, that by and large, there's just tons of them that had coercive managers, you know, and most of it's because they were insecure.
Right.
And you know, and I appreciate that because it's, you know, it's the one legacy that, you know, that's important to me. You know, it was when I got to Detroit and took over the station there. You know, it was owned by Intercity Broadcasting.
Yeah.
And they had tried to make it a black station, and unfortunately, at that time there were not that many blacks living in the coverage area.
Yeah, that's right. They were in the wrong coverage area for that format.
Yeah, and so you know, they own BLS in New York, and the Suttons were interesting people. They own you know, the theater, Apollo, and yeah, and they so it was interesting, but you know, it was a matter of of teaching, because that's one of the things you do as a manager, is the fact that you help develop people. And so we were able to turn that station around with a lousy signal that it had. And because we knew that, that past Woodward, the other side of Woodward, that it was the oldies would go well, and even though we had, that OMC was a little upset because they were trying to hedge their bets there and never, they finally did take the shift, but they, and Honey, that was NIC's, wasn't it?
No, that was Greater Media.
Greater Media. Okay. Yeah. And, and it was fun. We really enjoyed it. We stole the moniker and calls from New York station, because a lot of people worked when I got to KISS, they had imports from New York.
Yep. And
because that's where they knew, and so they exiled some of these people, and but it was interesting, that they learned, and the program director was, he wanted to be, he wanted to do R&B. Sergio was his air name, and he did oldies for a while. Most of the people gravitated back to New York. They had sticker shock when they realized how much, they were, I'm going back to New York and I got a good offer, more than I'm making here. And
not enough, though.
You're also going to spend a lot more.
Yeah. Well, I have a couple connections to your time there, Joe. Paul Christie, me at WNIC, when I was still working at VIC, that's when they decided to bring back the Keener reboot as WWKR. And I remember telling Scott, I said, you know what? It will not be as good as the original Keener, but it is in my DNA and destiny that I must work on that frequency. So that is what I'm going to do. And I interviewed with Paul Christie. He made me wait out in the lobby 8.5 hours in one day. He just kept seeing record reps the whole day. And at 5:30, he was coming to say goodnight to the reception. I said, whoa, hold on. I have been here since 8:30 this morning, and I am not going home until you hire me. And so he said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I said, let's go to your office and listen to my tape. And we did. And he hired me on the spot, and I worked weekends. So get a load of this, Joe. So my only day off, I was working at VIC 6 days a week, Sunday through Friday. And my off day was Saturday, which I came down to Detroit, and I worked at Keener, WWKR. And I did 4 hours on Saturday there. Then I did 4 hours immediately down the hall at WNIC. So do you think I screwed up the call letters every now and then between the VIC and the NIC? Yes, I did. And then the other thing I was going to tell you about the frequency 102.7, that was originally WBRB, Mount Clemens.
I couldn't remember the call letters.
Yeah, WBRB. And the tie to that is when I worked for Malrite in Milwaukee for Milt Maltz and Malrite, and they own WZUU, where I came in as a program ops guy and became a young boy general manager at 29. I was having a corporate dinner, and I was seated at Milt's table, and he was talking about his early times in Detroit when he owned WBRB in Mount Clemens, the AM, and had the FM, and had a talk station in suburban Detroit and Garden City, WTAK. And and because I'm of the age that I am, I was a kid then. I said, well, I used to listen to WTAK. You had Paul Winter and you had JJ Scott and blah, blah, blah. And I said, and on your FM, you had on Saturday nights from 6 till 9, you had Waltzing Wanda and Polka Joe live from the Senate Cafe. And he fell over laughing. He goes, oh my God. He goes, you are way too young to know that. And I said, no, I'm just sick in the head as a radio guy. And so I had a lot of fondness remembering your stories as it relates to KISS.
Yeah. It was, that was also a very rewarding experience. And we did well. I remember the time, one of the funniest things, and I had a discussion with Burton about this later, but we had to cut the contest. They had the Detroit News, the top disc jockey in Detroit.
Yeah.
Morning show. And everybody voted it, on it. And Paul Christie won, beat Burton, and he once he asked me, he said, how the hell did Paul beat me? And because his ratings weren't comparable.
Right.
Bob Paul did well, but not Burton numbers. And we bought every goddamn Detroit News that there was, ripped out the votes, and we had a assembly line there of filling them out and sending them in. And I said, you just got out promoted.
Well, by the way, I'm in contact with Dick quite a bit. We are working right now with Detroit Public TV to produce a doc on his life, the life and times of Dick Burton. And it is in pre-production right now. If it stays true to the plan, I will be the on-air anchor of it and host. And we'll probably, once we get enough sponsorship built up from some of the corporates where Dick has been so generous to some of the larger corporations in Detroit over the course of time, once we get the seed money to get going, we're going to hire the producer that we did use for the Robin Seymour documentary that ran on Detroit Public TV, which
that'll be great.
But I hosted that. And yeah, the producer's a guy by the name of Bill Kubota, who's a Spartan, by the way, and grew up in the Detroit area. He's close to our age, a little bit younger. But so he knew the Robin Seymour material inside and out. We didn't have to tell him too much. And of course, everyone was very familiar with Dick's legacy. So we're very excited to do the Dick Burton documentary. And what's amazing, I was with Dick not too long ago, and Dick has been off the air now for 12 years already. It's hard for me to believe it's been that long.
Yeah, I know. Time goes.
Yeah, it is flying by, but he's still very spry and doing well. And, still has his sharp mind. He still has his own website where he does a Facebook page where he posts things up, and he has a website that his daughter Jackie takes care of. So he's still in the game to the degree where he wants to be,
Yeah, he's a great guy. I had two chances, tried to buy a station, and one was KISS. And the problem was that Paul and I were going to try to buy it, and we kept improving it so much that the price kept escalating. I'm thinking this is not making sense. I'm competing with myself, and they finally priced it out of what we could afford, which was kind of an irony. The other one was that Burton we had discussions about buying ILS in Lansing, but that never went anywhere. But so it's and I don't know Dick well. I just have over the years, because we were around, talked with him a couple times, and we got together because I think that he was kind of interested in Lansing and knew that I was from Lansing. So
yeah, well, we have a quick story on that. Scott and I, we had a friend that won a contest to have lunch with Dick Burton and Tom Ryan when they were on WXYZ. And our friend I couldn't remember if she couldn't go or didn't want to go, but she said, I'm going to suggest that you and Scott go and meet Dick Burton and Tom Ryan. And so we drove down from Lansing, because I think we were at VIC at the time, weren't we? Or were we in Campus Radio, Scott? I don't remember.
I think it was VIC. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we were at VIC. And so we thought, hey, we're rollers. We're on VIC. They'll like talking to a couple of radio guys. And so we went and had lunch at the WXYZ commissary and had a great time. I certainly, as listeners, we knew of Dick from the time he arrived in Detroit, so we could regale him with all of our own stories of the days gone by. And so he was saying to us, I have a daughter who's interested in going to Michigan State. And we said, well, you're talking to a couple of Spartan guys here. We'd be happy to set her up with an interview with the dean of whatever school she's looking for and give her a tour and so on and so forth. So that daughter was Jennifer and Jennifer Purton, who, went on to great sales success, both for the ABC radio network. And then ironically enough, I worked with her when I was at JBK. She was part of our sales team there, and I was the director of marketing. And so, we got that connection with Dick and Tom Ryan. So fast forward, many years forward, I end up at OMC, and my morning man is Dick Purton. My afternoon guy is Tom Ryan. And, I reminded them of the story of having lunch in the commissary, and they go, "That was you?" I said, "Yeah."
I don't know. They probably didn't remember that. I mean, everybody.
They were just fooling me.
They were just being kind. Yeah.
It was fun.
I got a question for everyone.
Go ahead.
What, in your opinion, was the best promotion that WVIC did? And conversely, what was the worst promotion that we did?
Oh boy, we did. It's hard for me to. I remember we did the denim machine with Coke, and that was probably one of the best. They only gave out so many, and we were lucky to get one. But we were also pretty. I mean, VIC at one time was one of the highest rated FM stations in the country, and so it. But that was a good one, except when the person who won it got upset because we initially had promoted it with a Coke dispensing machine. And they couldn't, I guess the battery couldn't run it. So they put in a refrigerator or something, and was very upset that it was false advertising because it didn't come with a Coke dispensing machine.
Hey, Dana, can you give me screen share real quick?
Yeah, it's up running right now.
All right, there you go. There is the letter. Thank you for entering the WVIC Coca-Cola denim machine giveaway. I'm sure you'll agree this is the biggest and best giveaway that Mid-Michigan has ever participated in. And there's all the signatures. You got, Scott's there. Dan, you're on the call.
There,
you are.
There's Dan.
St. John.
Dr.
Dave
Steve.
Hoppy, Ron Shannon.
Wow.
Jim Atkinson.
Oh yeah, Jim.
Oh, Jim Atkinson. Yes.
I still talk to that guy. I mean, he's made it in streaming. He's doing he's making a living
bet.
with 3WK, his radio station.
From the fun factor, I still have in my kitchen right now 2 of the Coca-Cola denim machine glasses, the Coke glasses that we handed out. They're still on the shelf and still in working order in our kitchen right now.
Yep. I know that Dana's obviously collected a lot of the memorabilia too.
Yeah.
I have, some things, but not as much. And the one that is your backdrop, Dana, is a great backdrop because the colors really come out. And that was when we changed the design from the old block letters to the new logo.
I still have a belt buckle with that logo.
Yeah, that'd be.
Yeah, I've got the belt buckle, Dan.
That too.
Yeah. I have a couple of softball uniforms probably somewhere too.
And there you go. There is one of the early rate cards using the new logo, Joe. This is August. The reason I kept it is the effective date on it is my birthday, August 1st, 1977. And so here's the big money we were making in the TAP plan. We
Look at
that. You could buy 15 seconds for $8. And many
well,
more,
that's 1 year to the day after I met the woman who became my wife.
Yep.
1976, August 1st, Steve took Sunday off to be with Lori for his birthday, and I subbed for him. And this beautiful gal from Hazlitt showed up, and I was dating somebody else at the time. That was a fun wedding, wasn't it, Dan? I mean, you did square dancing for us there.
I met my wife square dancing, Scott.
Did you really?
I did. I was calling for the Michigan State Promenaders.
Yes.
I didn't do it heavily, but I was all they had, so I was their caller. And they brought in a guest caller, which was my wife's father. And she was there, and that's where I met her.
Wow.
1970, I guess it was 78.
Dan,
Wow.
you even tried to teach me calling for a little bit so that if I was going out and doing hops and I wanted to mix it up a little bit, I could do some calling. I was pathetic. And
Yeah,
I decided that should not be part of my portfolio, but Dan.
well,
should
that's
probably-
not something I did generally. You had to have the right group of people, and
Right.
so I certainly wasn't going to do it at a high school dance or anything like that. But at a wedding, and you have a diverse crowd there, it sometimes works. Depends on how you present it.
Well, Joe, you know how Cynthia was mentioning she got into horses, and there was the Junior Arabians, and then the other style of horses. I forgot what she had, but somehow during the days when we were doing hops and things, as I recall earlier on, originally the dances, the contracts for us were assigned by the front desk. We didn't know who was calling in. They would just say, okay, Steve Edwards available on this date, that kind of thing. Here's the contract. And I got a call or a contract in my box to do a barn dance at the Junior Arabian Horse Association of Michigan. And I didn't know what to make of it, but I just did what I normally do. And for whatever reason, I made a connection with those people. I ended up doing like 8 of those things over the course of 2 years. And then even when I came to Detroit and working on Keener, they continued to hire me for doing these Junior Arabian horse dances. And the barns were, I think they were out in Mason or somewhere around there. But these were all well-to-do families, daughters of doctors and lawyers that had these fine Junior Arabian horses. And they treated me like a king. So I loved doing that. And it was just one of those wonderful flukes of fate with the front desk throwing me a contract that happened to have a longevity to it.
I tell you, it's interesting. One thing that I learned from Cynthia, hanging around the stalls and barns and horses, is the fact that if I had known there were that many young, good-looking girls with horses, that I would have started to learn to ride a long time ago. As a kid, all these girls are there, and there's no boys. Very rarely are any boys riding, and it's just would be a great place for somebody that's got a little game to hang out there.
No, these were attractive young women, and they were talented with their, horse showing, and they were nice people too. I mean, it was really impressive. It was a whole sector of lifestyle I didn't know existed.
Yep. It is. They're good people, and the horses are they're wonderful animals.
Yes.
Right now we're kind of in between, but I've been on a horse once in my life, and Cynthia's mother, before we were married, I think, but gave me a lesson, and so I haven't forced her to swim, and she doesn't force me to ride horses, but I've been to a lot of events. I really enjoy going to the Grand Prix events, the jumping, because it's an Olympic sport, and you learn a lot. So, from the time that the horses that we have had, I also know it's very expensive, but that's why that it's a little difficult for a lot of them, and they're going away. Here, the Grosse Pointe hunt club, I think it is called, it dwindled down, and people just left it. We had a horse there for a while, and it just we ended up moving because one of the trainers finally moved north of here, and there's just not the crowd that used to be there.
Right.
But
it becomes a generational thing almost.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, I think they could probably get bored listening to all the talk, if you post this
No,
on
no,
Biggie.
this is great. Hey, by the way, talking about hops, it was funny. Dan talked with Pete Carey last time about they did the Stevie Wonder at a birthday party. And I thought that was fascinating.
A lot of stories in the Naked City.
Yeah, that's for sure. And Pete really has done well for himself. You know,
Oh, yeah.
I identified so much when you were talking about his role as Ernie Harwell. You know,
Yeah.
I went and saw him and really was impressed. And you know, we try to get downtown as much as we can. We always have. You know, people. One thing we learned about Detroit when we first came here, that everybody was, you know, everybody that was west or east of Woodward Avenue, I think, you know, and, you know, they stayed in the west or stayed in the east, and
true.
they're never acquainted you'll meet. And we are always surprised by that a little bit. It's not so bad now, but it's not quite the issues there. But yeah, it's been a great ride.
Yeah.
And you know, and broadcasting was a big part of my life. I never thought that I was going to do anything else, you know, but it's opened opportunities, you know, and a lot of friendships and good people.
I got a final question or a question for you guys. With automation and audiences dwindling and market consolidation, what do you foresee as the future of radio?
That's a good question. You know, I don't know, Dana. You know, it's I think there's always going to be radio, just because it's such a mobile medium. But you know, the ability to stream now with phones and everything else, you know, I don't listen to. That's not true. I listen to the ticket normally because I'm interested in sports, and so I will listen to that. But I get all my news from television, and I can pick up MSNBC on my radio, you know, satellite radio. So it's going to be it's a tough grind. I think that they're gonna have to find, you know, and the secret as always was, to localize it.
Yeah, it's local and it's personality.
Yeah, and you get away from that, and then you're just like a satellite, you know.
Right.
That you stations that become integrated with their community, and you know, and really take public service as, you know, as a seriously, you know, I think there's always going to be room for it, and or innovative formats.
Well, you know, when I came to Michigan Radio, we had 42 staff, and we had a news staff, but it was fairly modest in size. We didn't have a daily talk show, and we now have a daily talk show that is now celebrating 9 years stateside from 3 to 4 in the afternoon, and it repeats in the evening. And we now, as of this week, have 63 full-time staff, and we have made most of our staff expansion in the content area, in news reporters, producers, hosts, because it is important for us to have a lot of depth in the local journalism side, as well as having hosts that, you know, much as we were when we were jocks, you have to be a public person too. You just can't spin the records. You've got to go out and meet the public. And that's a high criteria for us in terms of the people that we hire, and making sure that even if they aren't naturals at it, we try to bring them along so that they can create, you know, friendships and relationships with listeners and with donors, because donors are a big part of our underpinning. Over 60% of our revenue comes from that. So there is the truth that generationally, there are not as many younger demos that even have a radio in their possession, much less one that works. And so that is a factor that we, you know, streaming for us will you know, meet some of those people some places. The biggest challenge in the future will be where most of radio is consumed, which is in the car. And because you can now, you know, connect your phone in any way and stream podcast or stream, you know, live, whatever you want to, there's that. But then there's, it's interesting. There's a number of people. I just read a study today, and I believe it was in a newsletter I get every week called Three Things from Tim Eby. There is still a recent survey that from Edison that shows people do want to have, across demos, do want to have a radio in their car because they don't want to have to depend on streaming. They don't want to have to depend on the access to bandwidth over a mobile device, which, let's face it, if there's any time where there's any kind of urgency or emergency, you can't get enough bandwidth out of cell towers, and broadcast, is a steady source that's free. So I think, when all those things sort themselves out, the stations that will remain are those that have invested in themselves to do a good job locally. And the biggest challenge, as we know, for the publicly traded companies is, and having worked for those big guys, that everything's about shareholder value and bringing it to the bottom line and quarterly performance, and how cheap can we do this and what can we get away with? And that is where radio will fail. And I don't know if that mentality will ever be reversed, but if they can't see the writing on the wall from that, then they only have themselves to blame.
Well, I'll tell you what, a small story in terms of my experience as a consultant. And that later in the consulting business, we got involved in lean manufacturing. It's the Toyota production system, basically. That was an American idea, but it was spread in Japan because Americans were too fat and sassy to want to adopt a lot of the principles. And we saw the value to our clients in adopting and even across outside of manufacturing into businesses and service businesses. And, it's a basic, simple process is to eliminate waste. And the mistake that's made is that most businesses, when they want to cut expenses, and so, but they start cutting the fat along with the, they start cutting the meat along with the fat.
Right, you're cutting muscle.
And, yeah, and it's if you study it, and it's a fairly simple process, but you have to know what you're doing, and you just eliminate the expenses that aren't adding any profit to your bottom line, and so you may spend money to make money, and that's good, but so often, and this is why people get hurt, it's cutting people.
Right.
And one of the major principles in lean manufacturing is that you don't eliminate people. You eliminate waste to free up people to do something else that's going to make money for you. And and working even in the auto industry, that it was very difficult to get people to adopt the principles and to stick with it, because it's not an overnight thing. You got to do it for a while. But there's some very, simple processes that you do to look at you can look at everything that you do. You can look at the way you have your garage set up, your kitchen. You can adopt these things personally, and you find out where are the wastes in it, whether it's a duplication of paperwork, or or a duplication of other things, and there are a lot of principles. Unfortunately, they have a lot of Japanese terms to them, and people get put off by that, and so a lot of the people that have done lean have tried to make it more Americanized. And as I said, it's that it was an American idea that was developed, and it just never was adopted here, because when it was developed, it was after World War II, and of course Japan had been decimated, and so they were open to things in terms of how do we build back. And they and Deming, who's supposedly the father of this process, went to Japan and sold it to the Japanese, and then Toyota in particular became really big in this process. So, you know, there are things you can do, and you can get caught up in trying to worry about the bottom line in the wrong way. And, you know, and it's hard to convince people of otherwise. We have a lot of, and you spoke about it in terms of people get into broadcasting who don't know anything about broadcasting, you know. And so you don't know who you're hurting. You don't know the mistakes you're making. All you know is you're saving a buck or something, you know, but it could be killing you. And it's true across the board in business is that we waste so much money and we don't do things efficiently. And even in broadcasting, you know, there are a number of things, whether you're scheduling or you know, anything that has a process. So and I think that you find the secret to that, and you apply it. And I think that radio would be all right. I think, you know, and I think that public broadcasting really is the model so much in terms of adapting for an audience and serving that audience.
Well,
You know,
Joe, the concern we have as public broadcasters is if the commercial guys keep screwing things up, there won't be a universe of audience available.
that's right.
Yeah.
And the only thing I can continue to hope for is if the commercial guys start folding the tent or burning the furniture, maybe I can get some of their frequencies and be on some other full market signals that I'm not capable of being on right now, and try to keep the flame alive. But, you know, it would be smart if there were more local broadcast operations that understood the value of the things you're talking about and wanted to continue to make things local. You look at stations like small independents like WLEN and Adrian, and you know, they really beat the drum about being local and don't pay lip service to it. And that's why they've been around for, you know, 70 years now as a success in their small community. There aren't enough of those stories around anymore. And that's the biggest challenge we face. So I think, you know, like even WHMI in Howell, that's owned by my pal, Rod Kroll, who was my general sales manager at WOWO, got brought up to Lansing to run FMK for Liggett for like almost 20 years. And then decided that he wanted to buy some stations. So he bought something in Owasso, the Castle or something like that. And then when Greg Jablonski was getting ready to sell Howell, he said, I'm only going to talk to local broadcasters that I know who I think would do a good job with my station. And so he hand selected Rod, and Rod's doing real well with that property. Now that I live in Livingston County, I can hear it clearly. You know, I can hear that they still are connected locally. They don't give that up.
Yep. That's the lesson, I think.
Yep.
Well, guys, I'm gonna bid adieu.
That's the end of a broadcast day. We're going to put up the color bars and play the national anthem.
Right.
High flight.
Okay. Well,
Great to see you all. Dana, thanks for setting this up.
And go green.
Go green,
Go
go
green
white.
out.
Thank you, Joe. Dan, it was great to see you again, buddy.
You too, Steve.
All right.
You too,
Take-
Scott, Joe.
Yeah, you guys take care of yourselves, my
all right,
friends.
so long. I'm going to go get some dinner now.
Yep.
All right.
Back to the
Bye-bye.
sandvines. See ya.
So long.